There were two young boys named Trevor and Will. They spent most of their summer vacation hanging around town looking for things to do. One hot August night, the boys were sitting on a fence by the main road. There was a cornfield just across the road. Suddenly, Trevor spotted something in the field. In the darkness, it was difficult to make out, but he thought it looked like some kind of weird animal. He nudged his friend and pointed in the direction of the strange-looking figure. Will said he could see it too. He wasn't sure, but the mysterious thing seemed vaguely human. The next thing they knew, the thing was gone. The boys craned their necks and scanned the field with their eyes. Out of the blackness came the thing. It slowly walked over to the edge of the field before disappearing again. Trevor and Will looked at each other, puzzled. "What was that?" asked Will. "I have no idea," replied Trevor. No sooner had he said that than Trevor felt a clammy hand on his shoulder. He turned around and found himself staring directly into the hideous face of the thing. He let out a yell of terror and surprise. The rotting skin on the thing's face was coming off in places, revealing the bone underneath. For a moment, it stared silently at Trevor with its dark, sunken eyes. Then, it suddenly grabbed hold of his arm. Trevor felt its fingernails dig into his flesh as he wriggled out of its grasp. The two boys leaped off the fence and ran down the road screaming in horror. They didn't stop running until they reached their homes. They tried to tell their parents and friends about the thing they had seen, but nobody believed them. When Trevor woke up the next morning, the scratches on his arm were still there. After a few days, they got worse and worse. Trevor got sick, and his parents took him to see a doctor. After examining his arm, the doctor told the boy it was infected and gave him some pills to take. Unfortunately, Trevor's condition got worse and worse. The infection spread to his entire arm, and it wasn't long before his flesh was rotting and falling off. He was taken to a hospital, but no matter what the doctors did, no treatment seemed to work. The infection spread throughout his whole body. Trevor was confined to bed and started to waste away. It seemed like he was beyond help, and as the days went by, he steadily grew worse and worse. His anguished parents could only sit at his bedside and cry as they watched their beloved son slowly rotting away before their eyes. On the day that Trevor finally passed away, Will came to the hospital to visit him. When the boy walked into the hospital room and saw Trevor lying in bed, he was horrified. His friend looked exactly like the thing. One summer night, a teenage boy was going out on a date with his new girlfriend. He picked her up at her house and they drove out to the edge of town. They parked the car in a secluded spot that was a well-known lover's lane. As they gazed out at the lights of the town, the boy put his arm around the girl and switched on the car radio so they could listen to some romantic music. He leaned over and the young couple began kissing and cuddling. Just as they were getting into the mood, the music suddenly stopped, and a newsreader's voice came on the radio. "This is an emergency announcement. Earlier tonight, a crazed murderer escaped from the state mental asylum. Police are warning citizens to be on their guard, since the patient is considered armed and dangerous. The insane killer is nicknamed the Hook Man, because after he lost his right hand in an accident, it was replaced with a steel hook. Everyone in the area should be on the lookout for a man fitting this description. If you see anything suspicious, you should report it to the police immediately." The girl became frightened and asked to be taken home. She knew that the state insane asylum was not far from Lover's Lane. She was also worried that the remote area where they were parked was the perfect spot for a deranged madman to lurk. The boy was feeling brave and assured his girlfriend that they were perfectly safe. He locked all the car doors and then tried to kiss her again. The girl became frantic and pushed away, insisting that they leave immediately. In a huff, the boy slammed the car into gear and spun its wheels as he pulled out of the parking space. On the way back to the town, they both calmed down, but the girl still held on tightly to her boyfriend. When they pulled up outside the girl's house, the boy got out of the car and walked around to open the door for his girlfriend. For a long time, he just stood there, staring at the door. At first, the girl couldn't figure out what was wrong. Then she realized that her door was still locked. She smiled and unlocked it. Still, the boy just stood there. The girl was puzzled and rolled down her window. She saw that the boy was staring down at the door handle. Slowly, she looked down herself and began to scream uncontrollably. There, hanging from the door handle, was a bloody, stainless steel hook. Once upon a time, there were two little girls. Their names were Blue Eyes and Turkey. Blue Eyes was named after the color of her eyes, and Turkey after the red dress she wore. They lived in a little house on the moor with their mother and their baby brother Arthur. Their father was a sailor, and he was always at sea, traveling to faraway lands. One day, Blue Eyes and Turkey went for a walk upon the moor when they met a gypsy girl playing on a little drum. As she played, a little mechanical man and woman came out of the drum and danced. Blue Eyes and Turkey were enchanted. They had never seen such an amazing toy, and they begged the gypsy girl to give them the drum. The girl just laughed. "I will give it to you," she said, "but only if you are very naughty. Come back tomorrow and tell me how naughty you were. Then we shall see." As soon as Blue Eyes and Turkey got home, they began to behave as badly as they could. They started shouting. They spilled their food on the floor. They drew all over the walls with their crayons and refused to go to bed. The two sisters did everything they could to upset their mother. The next day, they got up very early and hurried out onto the moor. There, they found the gypsy girl, playing on her drum. "We were very naughty yesterday," they cried. "Can we please have the drum now?" "Tell me what you did," the gypsy girl replied. So they told her. The gypsy girl just laughed. "Oh no," she said. "You were only a little bit naughty. You're going to have to be far worse than that if you want this drum." As soon as the sisters got home that day, they were as naughty as they could be. They threw their cups on the floor. They tore their clothes. They walked in the mud up to their knees and pulled up all the flowers in the garden. They also let the pig out of the pen and let it run away. Their mother was even more horrified than before by their behavior. "If you don't stop this," said the mother, "I will go away and take Arthur with me, and you will get a new mother, one with glass eyes and a wooden tail." That scared Blue Eyes and Turkey. They loved their mother, and they loved their baby brother Arthur. They could not imagine being without them, and the thought of it made them cry. "I don't want to leave you," their mother said, "but unless you change your behavior, I will have to go away." "We'll be good," the girls promised. Yet, they did not believe that their mother would really go away. "She's just trying to scare us," Blue Eyes said later. "We'll get the drum tomorrow," said Turkey. "Then we can go back to being good again." The next day, the sisters got up very early and rushed off to meet the gypsy girl. When they found her, she was playing with the drum again, and the little mechanical man and woman were dancing back and forth. They told the gypsy girl how naughty they had been the day before. "That must be bad enough to get the drum," they said. "Oh no," replied the gypsy girl with a smile. "You will have to be much worse than that." "But we promised our mother we'd be on our best behavior from now on," said the sisters. "If you really want the drum," said the gypsy girl, "you must be much naughtier." "It's only for one more day," Blue Eyes told Turkey. "Then we will have the drum." "I hope you're right," Turkey said nervously. Again, she told them that they had not been naughty enough. "You must be really bad," she said. As soon as they got home that evening, the young girl set about being as naughty as possible. This time, they broke the kitchen table and the chairs. They smashed all the fine china and ripped their clothes to shreds. And if that wasn't enough, the girls whipped the dog unmercifully, and they beat their baby brother with a stick, and they punched their mother in the face. Their mother began to cry. "Blue Eyes and Turkey," she sobbed, "you're not keeping your promise. If you don't stop being so naughty, I will have to go away, and instead you will have a new mother, with glass eyes and a wooden tail to live with you." "We will be good," said Blue Eyes. "We promise," said Turkey. "I hope so," said their mother. "I can't wait much longer. Please try to behave yourselves." However, the two girls still had their hearts set on the amazing drum, and when they were alone, they said to each other, "Tomorrow we will be good. Once we have got that drum, we will be good again." Early the next morning, before their mother was awake, Blue Eyes and Turkey ran out to the moor. There they found the gypsy girl. They told her all about the bad things they had done the day before. "We were horrid," said Turkey. "We were worse than we've ever been," said Blue Eyes. "You have to give us the drum now." That was when they noticed that the gypsy girl wasn't playing with the drum. In fact, it was nowhere to be seen. "Where is the drum?" the sisters cried. The gypsy girl just laughed. "It is gone. We gypsies are all going away today. I'm the last to leave." "But we did as you told us," cried Blue Eyes and Turkey. The gypsy girl laughed again. "Yes, I know," she said. "You have been really naughty, and now your mother has gone away, far, far away, and instead you have a mother with glass eyes and a wooden tail." Blue Eyes and Turkey began to cry. They rushed home as quickly as they could, but their mother and Arthur were gone. "Maybe they're just out shopping," said Blue Eyes hopefully. "Yes, they'll be back soon, I'm sure of it," said Turkey, trying to reassure herself. But when lunchtime came and went, and they were still not back, Blue Eyes and Turkey began to feel lonely and scared. They wandered on the moor all day, but when evening came, they went back home. The lights in the house were off, but when they peered through the window, they could see their new mother's glass eyes glistening in the glow of the firelight, and they could hear her wooden tail thumping on the floor. Lexi Morgan had a dream. She was walking up a dark staircase, and when she got to the top, she walked into a bedroom. The bedroom carpet was made up of large squares that looked like trapdoors, and each of the windows was fastened shut with big nails that stuck up out of the wood. In her dream, Lexi went to sleep in the bedroom, but during the night, a woman with a pale face black eyes and long black hair slipped silently into the room. She leaned over the bed and whispered, "This is an evil place. Run away while you still can." Then the black-haired woman grabbed her arm. Lexi Morgan woke up with a scream and laid awake the rest of the night, shivering and shaking with fear. In the morning, she told her landlady that she had decided not to go to Kingston after all. "I can't tell you why," she said, "but I just can't bring myself to go there." "Then why don't you go to Dorset?" the landlady asked. "It's a pretty town, and it isn't too far." So, Lexi Morgan went to Dorset. Someone told her she could find a room and a house at the top of the hill. It was a pleasant-looking house, and the landlady there, a plump, motherly woman, was nice as could be. "Let's look at that room," she said. "I think you'll like it." They walked up a dark, carved staircase, like the one in Lexi's dream. In these old houses, the staircases are all the same, Lexi thought. But when the landlady opened the door to the bedroom, it was the room in her dream, with the same carpet that looked like trapdoors, and the windows fastened with big nails. This is just a coincidence, Lexi told herself. "How do you like it?" the landlady asked. "I'm not sure," Lexi said. "Well, take your time," the landlady said. "I'll bring up some tea while you think about it." Lexi sat on the bed staring at the trapdoors and the big nails. Soon, there was a knock at the door. "It's the landlady with the tea," she thought. But it wasn't the landlady. It was the woman, with the pale face, and the black eyes, and the long black hair. Lexi Morgan grabbed her things and fled. There was a 16-year-old boy who got a summer job working on his grandfather's farm. One morning, his grandfather sent him into town on an errand to buy some provisions. The boy drove the pickup truck into town and parked outside the market. As he was walking along the street, he was jostled by someone in the crowd. When he turned around, he was shocked to see that it was the Grim Reaper, Death. As he stood there in the marketplace, Death beckoned to him. The terrified boy jumped back and ran to the pickup truck and drove back to the farm as fast as he could. When he got there, white-faced and trembling, he told his grandfather what had happened. "Let me take the truck," he begged. "I'll go to the city and hide. Death will never be able to find me there. It's the only way to avoid my fate." His grandfather told him he could have the truck, and the boy floored the accelerator and tore off at high speed. After he left, the grandfather went into town looking for Death. Eventually, he found the Grim Reaper standing in the crowded marketplace. The grandfather walked right up to Death and asked, "Why did you frighten my grandson when you saw him this morning? He's just a boy, only 16 years of age. He's too young to die."
"I'm sorry about that,"
said Death.
"I did not mean to beckon him. I was just startled. You see, I was very surprised to see him here in the marketplace. I have an appointment with him this afternoon in the city."
There was an old woman, all skin and bone, who lived near the graveyard all alone. She thought she'd go to the church one day to hear the preacher sing and pray. and when she came to the graveyard stile, she thought she'd stop and rest a while. And when she came to the old church door, she stopped to rest a little more. But when she turned and looked around, she saw a corpse upon the ground. The worms crawled out, the worms crawled in, from up his nose down to his chin. The worms crawled in, the worms crawled out, across his eyes, his ears, and mouth. The woman to the preacher said, "Will I look like that when I am dead?" "You already do," the preacher said. "You're skin and bone because you're dead." The woman fainted with the shock and split her head on a sharp rock. They buried the woman, all skin and bone. But from the grave they heard her moan. "I'm not dead yet," the woman cried. "You will be soon," the priest replied. There was a young girl named Josephine who was habitually late for Sunday morning mass at her local church. She always forgot to set her alarm and wouldn't wake up in time. Finally, she got tired of her parents telling her off and decided she would never be late for mass again. One Sunday morning, Josephine woke up at midnight. Unaware of what time it was, she thought she had overslept again and jumped out of bed. She quickly got dressed and ran out the door without ever looking at the clock. It was still dark outside, but it usually was dark at that time of year. It was very quiet and there was nobody else on the street. The only sound she could hear was the noise of her own footsteps on the pavement as she hurried towards the church. When she heard the church bell ring, she quickened her pace and took a shortcut through the cemetery. She got to the church just as the service was about to begin. She found a seat and took a look around. Much to her surprise, she didn't recognize anyone. The church was filled with people she had never seen before. They were all staring straight ahead, and an eerie silence hung over the gathering. When the priest came out to celebrate Mass, Josephine realized that he was a stranger too. The priest told the congregation to pray for the soul of a young girl named Francois who had died the night before. Josephine was shocked. She knew Francois, and she had never even heard that the poor girl was ill. Something was radically wrong. She began to feel very uneasy. She looked around again. As her eyes began to adjust to the dim light, she saw someone she knew. There was an old woman sitting at the back of the church. Josephine's heart sank when she remembered the old woman had died the year before. Looking towards the front of the church, she saw that some of the people sitting there looked very strange. Their skin seemed to be pearly white. One of them turned his head, and Josephine discovered to her horror that he was nothing but a skeleton in a suit. Just a skull and some bones. "This is a mass for the dead," thought Josephine. "Everybody here is dead except me. It's a specter's mass." She noticed that some of them were staring at her. Their eyes were filled with anger. It was clear to her that she had no business being there. Suddenly, she felt a tap on her shoulder. Nervously, she turned around and found her grandfather standing in the row behind her. He had been dead for 3 years. There was a worried look on his face. He leaned towards her and whispered in her ear, "Leave right now, while you still can," he hissed. "You don't belong here." Josephine immediately grabbed her coat and walked towards the door. She heard hollow footsteps echoing behind her and glanced back. The dead were rising out of their seats and following her. Their faces were twisted in fury and hate. Josephine was terrified as she dashed to the door, a pack of shrieking ghosts snapping at her heels. She felt skeletal hands grabbing at her, trying to stop her from leaving. She twisted and turned, struggling to free herself from their grasp. Her coat was ripped off and her hat was snatched from her head, just as she managed to slip out the door. Screaming and crying and almost out of her mind with fear, Josephine ran all the way home and told her parents what had happened. Later that day, someone came to the house holding what was left of Josephine's coat and hat. They had been found in the cemetery, torn to shreds. From the time I was old enough to notice things, I didn't like that house. I was afraid of the upstairs. I never felt safe there. Mama always kept the light burning at bedtime because I was afraid of the dark. One evening when I was 9, my sister was downstairs and I was asleep in bed. She was expecting Mama to come home at any moment. When she heard the front door open, my sister called out, "Hello, Mama." But there was no answer. She heard footsteps, but they didn't sound like Mama. Her footsteps were light, but these were heavy, like a man. "Who's there?" my sister called, but there was no reply. The footsteps continued up the stairs and wandered into the bedrooms. But when my sister called out again, "Who's there?" the footsteps stopped. She was young and afraid, but she knew I was sleeping alone up there. So she took the lamp and searched all the rooms. She even went into the attic, but didn't find anyone. My sister went back down to the dining room, but as soon as she sat down, the footsteps started again. They came down the stairs, through the dark kitchen, and then the door of the dining room where my sister was sitting slowly began to open. She was scared out of her wits. "Get out!" she screamed. The door slowly closed and the footsteps moved out through the kitchen towards the front door. She heard the door open and shut, so she ran to the window to see who it was. There was nobody in sight, and there were no footprints in the fresh snow. That was when she realized that whoever or whatever had walked in, it wasn't human. She huddled on the couch and waited for Mama to come home. Not long after that, we moved out. But something strange happened before we left. My sister and I were in the living room when all of a sudden we heard terrible groans. It sounded like someone was in agony. The groans seemed to be coming from the cellar. They were so loud that our dog started howling, and the hair stood up on the back of her neck. She would always go anywhere with me, but when I tried to coax her to come down into the cellar with me and investigate, she wouldn't go. The cellar was well lit, so my sister and I went down, following the groans until we came to a little alcove, and then the groans ceased. I wanted to dig right there on the spot, but there was no time. I've always felt that if we had, we would have found the cause of all our trouble. Perhaps someone's bones were buried there. We moved away soon after that, and Mama would never let me ask the people living there today if they had heard anything. We were all glad to get out of that house. A man walked into a hotel late one night and asked for a room. The hotel manager told him the hotel was all booked up. "We've only got one room left," he said. "It's on the 13th floor, but we don't rent that one because it's haunted." "I'll take it," said the businessman. "I don't believe in all that nonsense about ghosts." The man took the key and went up to the room to get some sleep. As soon as he turned off the lights and got into bed, he heard the closet door squeak open. A pale, ghostly figure emerged from the closet and staggered forth, its fingers dripping with blood.
"Bloody fingers,
It moaned. When the man laid eyes on this horrible sight, he grabbed his suitcase and ran out of the room, still wearing his pajamas. He left the hotel that very night. The next night, an old woman arrived at the hotel, very late. The manager told her the same thing. "We've only got one room left, but it's on the 13th floor and we don't rent it because the room is haunted." "Sonny, I've seen a lot in my day," she told him. "Trust me, nothing could possibly bother me." As soon as she switched off the lights and got into bed, the closet door creaked open, and a ghastly figure stepped out. Its fingers were still dripping with blood all over the floor.
"Bloody fingers,
it moaned. The old woman shrieked and ran as fast as her legs could carry her. A week later, a teenage boy arrived at the hotel very late. He also took the haunted room, despite the manager's warning. He paid for his room, got the key, and headed upstairs. After he had unpacked, he took out his guitar and began to strum some tunes. Soon, the closet door creaked open, and the ghost appeared. As before, its fingers were bleeding, soaking the carpet with blood, and it was moaning.
"Bloody fingers.
The boy didn't pay attention to the ghostly figure. He just kept strumming his guitar. The ghost kept moaning and its fingers kept bleeding.
"Bloody fingers,
it moaned. Finally, the boy stopped playing the guitar. He looked straight at the hideous apparition and said, "Shut up and get yourself a Band-Aid."